Bruins Beat is brought to you by Prize Picks and the Game Time app.
And welcome into the Bruins Beat, presented by Prize Picks. Go use that promo code CLNS to get $50 back when you play, just $5. And presented by Game Time. Go use that promo code CLNS to get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply with the season starting for the NHL. You want to go to a Bruins game? It's a perfect opportunity. You want to go, maybe you're planning a trip. Maybe you want to go somewhere to watch an away Bruins game. Go use our friends at Game Time. And you will have a great time. That's Conor Ryan. I'm Evan Marinofsky. Connor, what is up?
Evan, I'm doing well. How you doing?
Doing great. This is we're right on the precipice of the start of the regular season, and we're worried about Hurricanes. This opening game.
Not the Carolina Hurricanes.
Not the Carolina Hurricanes, which we'll get to later. This opening game. So we're recording this Monday. Tuesday is the game against the Panthers to open the season. And right now, as of 2:55 p.m. on Monday, the game is supposed to happen. And you fly down Monday night to the game and you leave Wednesday morning. This hurricane, was it Hurricane Milton?
Hurricane Milton, yes. So
Milton, in honor of Milton.
The South Shore strikes, yeah.
This is the South Shore going back at the North Shore.
There's a few Milton NHL guys, right? Isn't Keith Yandel from Milton?
I believe, yeah. Milton.
I hope I'm not wrong, because I feel like if I fuck up like where guys are from, especially a bunch of South Shore guys, I'm gonna hear about it. But I think he's from Milton.
Should know this. I should know this.
We'll scrap this. I'll send blame your way.
It's my problem if we can't. I know there's a lot of great players who come out of Milton. But NHL wise, I'm drawing a blank at the moment. Yeah, I'm curious to see what happens with the game itself, whether it goes on. I'm not a hurricane expert, so I can't sit here and give you the science of it all. I'm sure you've been tracking it like crazy, considering you're flying into it. So
I'm not flying into the hurricane. I'm going to be in the same state in which a Category 5 is rapidly approaching. But
yeah,
it's not ideal.
Good luck.
I'll do a live podcast after the game. I'm gonna be out in the park, and I'm gonna look like Dennis Nedry from Jurassic Park. Just have like a poncho, just like, they always have like the Weather Channel where it's like the people out front and they're just getting like hit by like gale force winds. That'll be me.
It's just like they're just they're just like, just like this, like trying to walk against it, and they can't really do it.
Me, just like the hood's over, like Mark Kastelik. We really showed Carter Ray, and then just like the mic's gonna fly everywhere.
It took 7 cross-checking penalties by the middle of the second period.
Exactly.
I could see it. Those Weather Channel jobs, by the way, you and I being in this the media field, I think my North Star is one of those Weather Channel jobs where I'm like, yeah, it's pouring pretty hard out here. Or like, were you a Drake and Josh guy back in the day?
Of course, yes.
Remember when Walter
not that old.
Gave the false weather report and had to go and they stole all his clothes. He had to give the correct weather report in his underwear. I mean, that's iconic.
Of course.
Anyways,
who cares about The Godfather? We got to talk about Drake and Josh.
People
are probably like, we finally have like an actual preview episode, and they're talking about Drake and Josh,
and they are dicking around. Before we get to the season and the Panthers game and sort of our predictions for the season, because I know the Globe, you guys put one out, so people can go check that out there. Jeremy Swayman, Sunday morning, re-signs. They have the video ready to go. 8 years times $8.25 million. Shout out to John Buchagras, who called it on Bruins Beat last week. Whether it was informed or not, the shot went in. But again, I'm not really shocked at the contract. And I think, when people saw the Frank Saravalli article on Saturday morning, kind of diagramming how, if this goes into the season past Monday at 5 p.m., the Bruins lose cap space and Swayman loses money. So it's all the incentive to let's get this done. And they basically confirm that. What's your reaction to this?
Nice exhale, right? I think that's probably the collective sentiment shared by the Bruins and Bruins fans. And again, it's what we've talked about this entire time, Evan, where it's beneficial for all parties to get this taken care of, and that was the situation. Jeremy Swayman doesn't benefit from sitting out, not having rust form there. not get up to speed in what's going to be a critical year for him. And the Bruins obviously don't benefit from not having their number one goalie in net to start the year. So, as you said, like you look at the contract, we agreed, I think, last time we talked about this, that they weren't very far apart in terms of what the latest contract talks were, that it wasn't like this huge gap they really had to bridge there. So I think it all came down to, can all parties move forward beyond kind of all the drama that has played out? And I think, Sunday was a step in the right direction, right? We kind of didn't get a lot of anything, which is probably the right call in terms of talking about Cam Neely's comments and Louis Gross's comments. We expected, I think, Don Sweeney to not elaborate much on that and, chalk it up to business and negotiations and all those things. But Swayman kind of followed the similar script in terms of focusing on the future, what's past is past, and moving forward. And that's kind of the right probably mindset to have when you look at just the emotion, the drama, the history that comes that, has, we've talked about it time and time again with this negotiation. To have all groups move forward, to have, from the Bruins perspective, signing your franchise goalie who's 25. And we've said this throughout the process as well. Like, whatever you think of how the negotiations have gone and the ask and the contract itself, I don't think there's ever been a point where we've looked at Jeremy Swayman's production, his talent, and been like, well, I can't. This might age. This may not age very well. Like, again, it could. It's the most volatile position in hockey, but from what we've seen every year, he has taken steps forward. And if he's the same goalie that he was down the stretch last year in the playoffs, you got a guy that should continue to get better and better. If this is a guy that channels that emotion, a guy that has a chip on his shoulder, then he's probably even more motivated going into this year as well. And I think that benefits the Bruins, and it benefits him now being the fourth highest paid goalie, active goalie in the league. It wasn't easy, but I think all sides kind of win at the end of the day, right?
I was gonna say, I mean, for his camp, like driving a tough ask. They didn't get the 9.5 that they wanted, but considering the Bruins reportedly came in, I think it was 4 times 6.25, and then he ends up getting 8 times 8.25. Like, you got a $2 million a year bump on top of what was already, doubling your salary from this past season. And you got more than the 8 million, so you got above 64, which is what the Bruins laid out. And the Bruins lock up their goalie. They don't have to trade him. Like, they just didn't get that messy. Or not messy, but not to that point.
So much for those Clayton Keller things. Dude gets named a captain like the next day. We don't have to worry about the Utah hockey team trade proposals or anything like that, because, again, it wasn't going to equal what Swayman brings this team. That the one kind of missing piece they had beyond, maybe scoring up front, but the one missing ingredient was a number one franchise goalie, and now they got him.
Pains me to say the James Higgins thing will probably not come to fruition. Really thought we had an idea there, but not quite. I did find it interesting, though. Obviously, both sides on Sunday morning did not really answer questions clearly, or they weren't fully open about sort of the questions about the negotiations. Swayman did kind of mention something along the lines of like, oh, well, we know the truth and this and that. But again, I think the ill will for him, at least, probably goes away, at least for now, in terms of like, hey, I just signed an 8-year times $8.25 million deal. Like, I'm set for life now. Now, again, he doesn't forget things. So maybe there are things he's using to motivate himself in that, things that were said in the negotiations that we don't even know. But again, didn't go into the regular season. It didn't. It went to the very end of training camp, but it did not go all the way in to the regular season. Now, the next question is, when's he going to be ready? And on Monday afternoon, you have Jim Montgomery saying that they have not ruled out potentially starting Jeremy Swayman. He had been, and this pains me to say, it hurts to say, he had been training with BU for the last month and the staff over there. So he'd been training there. Yes, to win for the Terriers, to win for the, Maine fans are freaking out about this.
Sorry, I have LL Bean, so it's kind of like a Terrier Maine kind of crossover, right?
Yes, it is. LL Bean is as Maine as it gets. But again, I wonder how ready he is. There you go. Nice.
Let's hold this up for this segment.
Is that the stress ball? Is that the Terrier stress ball? Squeezing.
That's when they lose the bean pod. That's why he doesn't have. That's why he doesn't have any ears. So they've been ripped off.
I do wonder when he's actually ready. I hope they're not rushing him for night one if he actually isn't ready. I mean, my guess is he probably is close. But what do you think?
Yeah, well, maybe they end up playing on Thursday and that gives him the actual runway he needs. But if they do have this game on Tuesday, yeah, it's fascinating in terms of where Swayman thinks he is, and also again, it falls on where the team thinks. I'm sure you look at Swayman, how competitive he is. Of course, he's going to be like, I'm ready to go. Like I've been on the Gannis, been working out.
You don't want to listen to players. You don't want to listen to players when
Yes.
it comes to playing when they're not ready or playing when they're hurt, because they're always just going to say, yeah.
And again, like this could go in two different ways if they have this game on Tuesday. Like Swayman could go out there and the guys are fired up. He's back in the lineup and he stops 30 or 31 shots. The Bruins start the year off with a win. Or he's really rusty and you got a hyped up. I remember like the last time the Bruins got smoked in their first game was the game against the Capitals. And I think it was after they raised their banner. Right? Because it was 18-19 was the start of that year.
It was. Yes.
So, and then they got obliterated. Like the only highlight from the Bruins, I think, was like Marchand, I think, beating the crap out of Laz Eller. I think it was the only highlight.
I remember that, yes.
Which again, maybe if the Bruins do that and Swayman does start and he's rusty and they lose, maybe it starts a season where they go on another cup run because that's what happened that year. So, but not to go off on a tangent, but I do think, it falls on, I think, Bob Essenza and the Bruins staff to see just how ready he is. Because, listen, every team in the NHL can beat any single night, but a team like Florida that has a lot of explosive talent, we've seen the last couple of years, team that likes to muck things up down in the crease, all those things, that's going to be an emotional game. And again, both sides of the coin. You don't want to put Swayman in that spot when he hasn't faced live competition. Maybe he's so jacked up that you get something out of it and the players are hyped up and all that. So I think that is definitely something worth monitoring. I would probably lean more on like just being conservative and sticking with a guy that has been here in camp the entire time, but we'll see. That it also very well could just be gamesmanship from Jim Montgomery. He didn't really reveal the goalie situation at all last year during the playoffs, and maybe we're just getting a head start on it this year. That could be the case.
I also think, like, again, and I doubt that he's actually fully game ready. I think he could easily get himself up for playing the Panthers and play really well. I have no doubt. But I also wonder, he's making $8.25 million a year now. Third highest paid player on this team. You're playing opening night. Like, there's also that end of it too. And I think, like back to your point about the contract itself, I think it's a gamble. I do, but I think it's a smart gamble. It makes sense. As we've said before, there's not a lot of red flags. There's really no red flags with him on ice or really even off. But there is now this added pressure. There's a big added pressure where you're making $8.25 million a year. You're the fourth highest paid goalie in the league. You got the Ilya Sorokin contract. You're locked in for 8 years. You better be good. And there's again, as you said, there's pros and cons. If he starts that game against Florida on Tuesday and gets crushed, is there that, oh my God, like this gets this contract off on the complete wrong foot? Or do they play it more conservative and say, nope, we'll start you on Thursday at home against Montreal. Again, I guess we'll leave that up to goalie Bob, but I would assume it's Korpisalo on Tuesday. I would assume, just given that, they've sort of said that the whole time. But again, Montgomery listens to his players on stuff like that. So maybe that is what it is. I want to get into the Panthers, that matchup, because I think this is not any just opening game. And then I want to get into predictions for the season. What do we think happens? First, a quick word from our friends over at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks. Prize Picks invented the flex play, which means you can still cash out if your lineup isn't perfect. You can double your money even if one of your picks doesn't hit. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks is the best way to win real money this football season. Which players are going off? Which ones aren't? Make your picks in less than 60 seconds and turn your sports opinions into real money all season long on Prize Picks. It's hard not to pick more receiving yards for Justin Jefferson or more passing yards for Josh Allen. So download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. Now, back to the show. So I think this game one has been, talked about for a long time, mentioned on Behind the B and everything. And part of the reason is because the Panthers are a measuring stick. Panthers have knocked the Bruins out the last 2 years. And the Bruins sort of kind of copying them in a sense, looking to get bigger and stronger and tougher and not get pushed around by them. Also adding guys like Lindholm who can help with scoring in the offseason. And I think this is kind of a theme you're going to see all year is, how do the Bruins match up with the Panthers? The Atlantic is interesting in this season because, again, on paper, like the Leafs are still going to be in it. The Lightning are older. They're kind of teetering. They did trade Sergachev in the offseason, so you do wonder how much that impacts things. And then you have that group of Buffalo, Ottawa, Detroit that you're kind of waiting for them to, all right, one of you guys should try to step into the playoffs. Did you see that clip of Linus Ullmark talking to the Canadian media?
Yes.
Poor guy.
I remember those Ullmark scrums.
Yes.
On your toes.
And then you have Montreal. And so to me, like, I think, the big thing is I still, and we'll get to this later, I still put the Bruins above the Leafs and those other Atlantic teams, but it really does come down to how do they fare against Florida? And again, they beat them 4 times in the regular season last year. So I guess we won't really know during the season unless something drastic happens throughout.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, I still feel like Florida is the team to beat, but you look at just how much, mileage they've tacked on the last couple of years. It also wouldn't surprise me if they go on another run, but maybe they're coasting a little bit more once you get to the regular season, right? Like you don't really have to necessarily, it's like LeBron where he'd like take like 5 months off and then would just turn it on for the playoffs. And like, again, Florida has the amount of talent there and the experience now and all those things that they could easily do that. So I do think they're probably still right there with the Bruins in terms of, I would say on paper, the 2 best teams. Toronto, the talent's there, obviously. I do like Tanev and that signing, at least in the short term, as a guy that kind of helps them out quite a bit there. I think he's a really good player, but you still have the goaltending questions there, and we'll see if if Wall takes a big step forward for them. But and then you've got Tampa, pretty top heavy, but you look at like the bottom of their depth chart, you're like, interesting. Which again, like Tampa has a track record of those guys end up scoring 25 goals.
I was gonna say they all end up being nasty.
Yeah, so you do run that risk. So that's probably famous last words from me. But it does feel like it's still going to be the usual suspects, though. Like I still think you're going to have a situation where, Buffalo, which did not look all that great to start the year, Detroit, all these teams are still going to be kind of blocked from the other teams still at the top of the Atlantic. I can't see, maybe Detroit just sneaks through. Maybe like a team like Tampa drops off. But I don't expect any seismic. It feels like every year there's always that talk of the sea change of the Atlantic and some of these teams taking steps forward. And, maybe a team like Montreal gets a little bit better just because of how much young talent they have. But I still think it's going to be the usual 4 teams all kind of fighting at the top of the division going into this year.
Yeah, I don't foresee any massive shift in the Atlantic. Again, Montreal's still in a rebuild. They might be a little bit better. Love Lane Hudson, but I can't imagine you're in the playoff hunt. And as you said, again, Buffalo, Detroit, Ottawa. Ottawa would probably be the favorite because you got Ullmark now, so you do have a good goalie. But goalies also can be really weird in their first years in new places, so that's another thing. Over in the Metro, obviously, you have New Jersey, who's sort of the team that everybody suspects is going to take a big step forward, not just go from being, a team that's out of the playoffs, but a team that is competing for a cup. They certainly have the roster to do so. So I think that, for the Bruins, though, it's that Panthers matchup. How do you do against them? Every regular season game is going to be hyped up. But again, Bruins won all 4 last year, still lost in 6 games. And I don't, like you mentioned it, some sort of drop off. And I agree, they are due. But does that just mean, as you said, in the regular season, 3rd in the Atlantic, or something like that. But then turning it on in the playoffs and just kind of having it, which is what we know they have. So I'm curious to see what happens. In the Atlantic, I don't see the Metro. I think is more volatile. I think Metro, you've got a lot of possibilities, which we can kind of get to in a second, because we are going to make some predictions. These always come true. We're going to make some predictions. First,
they always come true.
They always happen. But first, quick words from our friends over at Game Time. Fall is beginning, which means football is back. Nothing beats a college football atmosphere. And with both college and NFL games, who doesn't love a good tailgate? Get to the game with Game Time. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. This fall, my friends and I are going to the Patriots-Titans game in Tennessee. And how will we get tickets for the game? Game Time, of course. The super deal has been amazing to us in the past, and there's no doubt it will be great to us again. I just love the curated deals, which make it easier to find the best price on great seats. Some other features I love are the lowest price guarantee, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Game Time Picks curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, and theater. All-in pricing. Toggling this feature shows the total upfront with no surprise fees at checkout. So, download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code CLNS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Now, back to the show. So, prediction time, Connor. This is what it all comes down to. We talk about these throughout the year. We do updated predictions, I think, usually midway through the year. Look back at these. If there's a slow week, we'll be like, let's look back at our predictions from the beginning of the year. And I think we might have done a podcast like later in the summer that was sort of like bold predictions for the season.
Like Super Bowl predictions, yeah. I think we should probably like just scrub, because I feel like those are so heinously bad that
yes,
like
it's
gonna work.
We're not going to dive into those yet. In terms of where you think they finish, I found this interesting because I know what you're going to say, but I was reading your colleagues at the Globe, because you were included in that story, obviously, and everyone had them either third or wild card. You differ. Explain.
Yeah, so I mean, I have them at 52, 20, and 10, first in the Atlantic. And I just think, again, I'm very glad that I posted this after Jeremy Swayman signed his contract, because that changes things. But
yes,
again, I think you look at this team, and the way I always go into a year, it's just looking at each individual player, and you can, I think, have sweeping declarations of like how the decor looks, and I think a lot of people are very high on that. You look at Jeremy Swayman and the goaltending and all that. But even if you like look at, you can paint, I think, with a wide brush, like the Bruins might have some scoring trouble. I think you look at each individual player and their individual growth and how they can contribute. I think there's a lot of guys that it's not like you're asking. This is what I feel like I've hopped on this before. It's not like, 2 years ago when they went on that run and people were like, oh, like Bergeron and Krejci are back, but we'll see what they do. But you're not asking for Frederick to go from, what was it, like probably like 13 goals to 28. Or anything like that. But can a guy like Frederick, can a guy like Jake DeBrusk, at right wing, take a step forward?
And we're talking about 2 years ago. I don't want people thinking that you're talking about DeBrusk for this current lineup.
I looked at like that year and I was like, well, this team actually could be really damn good when you look at just guys that are in spots to succeed. And then moving it to this year, whether it's, on the fourth line, can a guy like Mark Kastelik and Johnny Beecher, who showcased stuff last year, Max Jones, can they take steps forward? Can Mason Lohrei, who got better and better every single time he was called up, and by the end of the playoffs was dealing with the most physical forechecking team in the league in Florida, and looked like a pro in terms of maneuvering and getting out of trouble and those things. Can he take a step forward? What about, can Elias Lindholm, and we're not expecting him to have that 42 goal, 82 point season, but can he be a 65 point guy, being on the bumper spot on the power play and riding shotgun with David Pastrnak? Yeah. And I think you just look all through the lineup, there's all those guys that in terms of incremental improvement, Frederick, Morgan Geeky. You've got a lot of guys that are either in their prime, still young, that have room to grow. That, yes, you've got the franchise guys, you got the Pasternaks and the McAvoys and all that, but I think all around this roster, you've got a lot of guys that have more. And if they can all complement each other, and you're in a spot where you already have a really dynamic defense, you have a number one goalie in place that should continue to get better. Scoring might be an issue, especially at the start of the year as you try to find the right pieces in place. But I really like how this team is built. And even if maybe first in the Atlantic is overshooting it, I think even like Jim McBride has them going to the Cup, because they're still a team that even if, as long as you're in, you have a chance. And this feels like a team that if they can gel and get some cohesion and they play to their identity of, I think, what they tried to make this team into over the offseason, it's a team that I think is going to be a tough out. And sometimes that's all you kind of need is just a lot of guys committed and a team-wide identity of being that tough out. And you can go pretty damn far just kind of sticking to that.
You can. And that's why I agree with you. And I think I've said this on a previous podcast. They got better this offseason. I know they lost some depth pieces, but they also gained some depth pieces. Guys like Max Jones, Mark Kastelik. And then you have obviously the big signings of Lindholm and Zadorov. They are much better on defense. They are much bigger on defense. They're more physical. Obviously in net, you lose Linus Ullmark. That does not help. You are going to have a couple letdown goalie games that you did not have last year, be it Swayman playing a lot, Korpisalo stepping in. I get that. I just think this roster is good. I do. And my two question marks are that second line right wing spot when it comes to scoring. I have no doubt that Marchand, Coyle, and Geeky are going to do their job defensively. But I do wonder about them scoring and providing legitimate top six production. And the other thing is just team speed. I mean, you got a lot of big guys now. And I think that, they're going to be fast on forechecks and things like that. But you do worry overall team speed going up against teams like the Avs, who are wicked fast, or the Oilers, who are a team that everybody kind of has as a cup pick this year, which again, it's hard. I think the field's wide open. So, no judgment there. In terms of middle six scoring though, like Geeky and Frederick, never underestimate someone in a contract year. And both of those guys are in a contract year. So would not shock me if those guys go off. I have them first in the Atlantic. And I know this is like, we sound like such Bruins homers. Like, oh, of course these guys think they're going to be first in the Atlantic. Oh, the Bruins goobers are at it again. No, I think it's legit. Like, I honestly, and I, a lot of your colleagues had them third or wild card team. I just don't like, this team is going to be hard to play against, and I think Lindholm boosts your scoring a good amount. I do. I think that top line, whether Zacha stays there, whether they move Marchand onto it, I think that line is really legit. So I don't like, my expectations are very high for this team. They're very high.
Yeah. And I just think, you look at all the other players they got out there that, it's all about just setting reasonable expectations, which is not usually what you do when it's bold prediction time before the season actually starts. But like, even look at a guy like Justin Brazeau, who kind of came out of nowhere last year, and he's kind of been as advertised so far in the preseason. He's got a simple game, but he's really good around that net. And if like Nick Ritchie can score 15 goals just at the net front, I think like a guy like Brazeau is more skilled around there, especially when he's handling the puck. Like, have him on the third line, you probably can get a guy that can contribute at pretty steady 5-on-5 pace. Like, that's not saying that, if we were homers, I feel like it'd be like, oh, Justin Brazeau is getting 25. No, but like, I think he's got a lot of guys that can continue to build their games. And that's not saying, right, that like, oh, and then Nat Potter is going to come up and he's going to have 50 points and Lysel's going to have a hat trick. I think like it would not surprise me if this team still at the deadline, you have them in the mix for the next, Tyler Toffoli, like those kinds of players that sprout up every trade deadline, the veteran 20 goal guys. I'm sure they'll look at that, especially
they should be.
Well, yeah. Who are those guys? Remains to be seen. Off the top of my head, I have to think of who would be guys that we already know are going to get dangled at the deadline. But
I did see someone. I think it was Frank Saravelli had like Brock Nelson as someone who could be, and that's a left shot guy. But
yeah. So like, I'm sure they'll be in the mix for that. It may not be pretty, especially at the start of the year, but I just think you have the pieces in place that, especially over the span of a season, like I imagine like Charlie McAvoy is probably getting QB, like, he's going to be QB1 on the power play, but as the year goes on, maybe like Mason Lohrei is a better fit there, and maybe he gives you more. And like, I'd be more intrigued with what this power play looks like at the end of the year when you've got Lindholm at the bumper, who's settled into his role. Potentially Lohrei a left shot, where I think especially passes to Pasternak are a lot smoother with a left shot up there. And a guy like Lohrei, who you saw it in spurts last year, but like reminds you of a guy like Krug, except he's much taller in terms of like that creativity, going down the wall, all those kinds of things. And I just think you look at just the potential for this group is really, really high, especially when we get to the springtime when things actually start to matter, right? So, I just think it's a really intriguing group. I really like the makeup of the team. I think it's going to be a fun team to watch, like whether it's this fourth line that I feel like I've been talking about them for like weeks now of how excited I am to see how they play, or like Zadorov. Like, it's also just fun having those players in the lineup that give you, whether it's a throwback to maybe the Bruins teams you like in the past or what have you. Like, I remember game one of the playoffs this past year where Maroon played, and he played, what was it, 9-10 minutes, but like knocked a guy into a bench, was chirping at them. Like Zadorov is like that, but for a much longer, a much more aggressive player. And those guys are just fun to have in the lineup. Now, it's not fun if he's not, he's
getting burned.
Yeah, exactly. So you need to, make sure he's still adhering to, that part of his game. But I just think that mentality, that mindset, that intimidation factor, that physicality, I think it can go a really long way, especially once you get to the playoffs. So I think it's gonna be a really fun year.
Let's do how far we think they get in the postseason, because I think there's other parts to predictions. I mean, how far is Jim Montgomery? Does he get his extension at some point? Is he fired? I think ESPN had him getting, or I think it was Greg Wyshynski. And I hope I'm not getting this wrong, wrote that his bold prediction for the Bruins was Montgomery doesn't last the year. I think ultimately, like, they start out hot for the first, however long. I think Montgomery just gets the extension. I think that's probably what happens. In terms of playoffs, though, I got to say, I really wanted to say they at least go to the Cup, but I couldn't have them go to the Cup and be first in the Atlantic. It had to be one or the other. So I have them losing in the Eastern Conference Final to the Carolina Hurricanes. I know. But the Hurricanes have to get through at some point. I do. Like, that team has to push through. But I think that I think that's where it ends, at least in the Eastern Conference Final. And it's Carolina. Yeah. I wanted to say the Rangers, but I don't know. The Hurricanes, to me, just like have been at it forever. And at some point, they have to break through.
It would be the most hockey shit ever, though, of like, like the Capitals finally won, and that was like probably like one of the worst rosters they had of like that core. Yes. It's like Carolina's like lost like Shea, they've lost all these guys like on defense, but like they're kind of like the new Tampa where they bring in these guys that are impact players right out of the gate. Like you look at Chatfield and some of these guys these past couple of years.
After saying that, by the way, the Hurricanes aren't going to even be in the playoffs.
But like you look at all the guys they have, and also like the amount of core younger players they have that. Like, I feel like Seth Jarvis is going to, like, blow up again this year. Like, yeah. I'm going Bruins fall to the Rangers in the conference final. I'm going to say 7 games. And I think it just comes down to, I think they're kind of, ideally kind of carbon copies of each other, right? In terms of a lot of speed, a lot of size all throughout the lineup, a lot of, physical play. Rangers have a lot of really physical players, both elite goaltending. But I just think probably overall scoring depth probably lifts the Rangers just over the Bruins. But which again, I think if you're a Bruins fan and they get to the brink of a Cup final with this team that again should continue, I think, to build. When you look at these guys like Lohrei and some of these younger players, guys that are still, the Bruins have gone from one of the oldest teams in the league to I think they're like in the bottom third or like middle of the pack right now because they've got a lot of guys that are in that 26 to 30 range too. So they're a team that, again, if this is kind of setting the foundation and your foundation is still the conference final game 7, I think you feel pretty good about where you are. And I just think overall it's going to be a really fun year. And if we're wrong, we can just delete the video.
It never happened. This never happened. Since 2007, the Bruins, there's one thing in the postseason that they've never done. And they've never lost in the Eastern Conference Final. And we're both predicting that this is the year that finally happens.
Mm-hmm.
What also is interesting though with the Bruins in general, at least right now, you look at this Montgomery group, obviously they had the heartbreak of 2023, sort of the little engine that could in 2000, earlier this year in 2024. You do wonder if like this group finally breaks through. Like they've been through, the shit they've been through over the last 2 years. Is this the year? Do they overcome the Panthers? Do they if they played the Hurricanes in the Eastern Conference Final, do they overcome the Hurricanes, which is a team that they kind of, had at least had trouble with in 2021? So, I just, or 2022, excuse me. Like I have a tough time putting them in the cup. I do. I think there's other teams in the East that just, are more in a position, but it wouldn't shock me. Like what Jim McBride said about them going to the cup final, it wouldn't shock me at all. Like they are built for the playoffs. That's the size element is for the postseason. It's not for, as long as they get in, whether it's first, second, third, wild card, whatever it is, if they get in, I think anything can happen. And I know that's not like great analysis, but it's the truth. Anything can happen.
That is the truth.
Do you have any like crazy predictions for the season for individual guys? I know I didn't tell you this before, but like, is there anything that you have cooking that you're like, ooh, gotta say this one?
I wouldn't say there's anything too crazy in terms of like McAvoy for Norris or anything like that. I'll say, I'll buy into the hype though. Maybe I am a homer. No, but I'll say Vezina finalist, top 3 for Swayman. I think Shesterkin wins it. Swayman's top 3. And the Bruins already feel pretty good about what that contract is.
That's fair. I think if I had to pick one, I really believe in Lowry. I think Lowry moves into some sort of QB1 on the power play.
Nice 41 points.
Yeah, like some legit, like a good point total. I think that those 6, like Lindholm, McAvoy, Lowry, Carlo, Zadorov, Peak, I think they rotate around. I don't think that there's a set pairing, and I think the biggest reason is because that kid just keeps playing above what they think he's going to be. So yeah. I think he, whether it's 40 points, somewhere around there, and I think he has a couple highlight reel goals. We do sound like complete fucking homers, but like I do. I think he's phenomenal. So I think that ends up being the case. That's like my little bold prediction. Well, I'm excited, Connor. We made it. Like this is it.
We've made it.
We did it, Connor. What can the people look forward to from you at the Globe and Boston.com?
Yeah, we'll have you covered every step of the way this season. We've got a few features, a few preview articles, all that stuff coming out the next couple of days with the regular season finally here. So you can read all of that over at Boston.com and the Boston Globe. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, you can at Conor Ryan _93.
Go do all that. That's Conor Ryan. I'm Evan Marinofsky. Bruins Beat listeners. Have a great rest of your week.